Sometimes the most dangerous wars are the ones that haven't even started yet. We live in a world where power is often measured by the weapons we hold, the threats we make, and the fear we can instill. But today, let's pause and ask, what if the strongest nation is not the one that fires first, but the one that holds back with wisdom? Sometimes we look at the world and believe that power means having the most money, the most followers, the most control, the most weapons. But the truth is, power isn't just about possession, it's about purpose. Because even the most powerful weapon in the hands of someone with no purpose becomes empty, just noise, just fear. When nations build their arsenals and stockpile tools of destruction, it often comes from a place of fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being overtaken, fear of becoming irrelevant. But what if we stopped for a second and asked, why do we need these weapons in the first place? Is it truly to protect or to threaten? Is it to preserve life or to remind others we can take it away? Purpose is what makes all the difference. Because a nation with 100 missiles but no clarity in its values can cause chaos, not safety. But a nation with fewer weapons, grounded in strong purpose and compassion, can lead in silence without ever having to fire a single shot. Purpose has always been the difference between building and destroying. Look around the world today. See how people speak of power like it's a number, a calculation, a race. Who has the better tanks, the smarter drones, the faster jets? But rarely do we ask, who has the better heart? Who has the stronger will to protect their people with peace instead of panic? A fighter jet can travel the speed of sound, but the speed of healing? That takes time. That takes understanding. That takes patience. And that cannot be measured in megatons or range. It can only be measured by the quiet decisions made behind closed doors where no cameras roll, no headlines appear, but lives are saved because someone chose mercy instead of muscle. In life, we all have weapons. Not literal ones, maybe, but words can be weapons. Choices can be weapons. Even silence can be a weapon when used to ignore or hurt. And just like nations, we have to ask ourselves, why are we holding this weapon? What do we plan to do with it? Are we building walls or bridges? Are we defending or just trying to dominate? Because the line is thin, and it's easy to convince ourselves that we're protecting, when deep down, we're just trying to prove something to the world, to others, or sometimes just to ourselves. But here's the truth. Real power doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need to explode. It doesn't need to destroy. Real power is quiet. It's calm. It's clear. It's the kind of power that knows it can act but chooses not to. And that choice, that's purpose. Purpose says I have strength, but I will use it to shelter, not to shake. Purpose says I will lead with vision, not vengeance. Purpose doesn't just react, it reflects. Maybe the world needs fewer warriors and more watchers. People who are brave enough to stand between conflict, to hold space for peace, even when it's unpopular, even when it's mocked. Because the most dangerous thing isn't a weapon. It's a leader without purpose, a mind without direction, a heart without compassion. We often look at countries and ask, who's ahead? Who's stronger? Who would win in a war? But we rarely ask, who would win in peace? Who would dare to be the first to lay down their arms? Who would risk being misunderstood for the sake of protecting lives? Because that is real courage. That is real strength. The truth is, we don't just need better weapons, we need better hearts, better intentions, better conversations. And no matter how far the missiles can reach, no matter how fast the jets can fly, they will never outdistance the purpose behind them. Because weapons rust, but purpose, when it's rooted in truth and hope, lasts forever. So maybe it's time we start asking different questions. Not what do you have, but why do you have it? Not how strong are your weapons, but how strong is your purpose. Because when you know your purpose, you don't just change history. You protect the future. There are battles that happen on the ground, and then there are battles that unfold in silence, through strategy, technology, and choices made behind closed doors. And sometimes, the loudest wars are not fought with bullets, but with the quiet buildup of power, waiting, watching, deciding when or if it will ever be used. Israel stands as a symbol of cutting-edge innovation, a country small in size, but vast in capability. You look at their technology and you see how much of their energy has gone into preparing for survival, not out of pride, but out of necessity. They've lived under constant threat, and from that tension came breakthroughs, like the Iron Dome, which protects cities from incoming rockets. It's more than a system. It's a silent guardian that reflects how determined they are to defend life. And then there's their cyber intelligence. Precise, unseen, and powerful. They know how to move in digital shadows, how to disable threats before they even become visible. It's not about who makes the most noise. It's about who can see the danger coming and quietly disarm it before the rest of the world even realizes. But then, on the other side, there's Iran, a different kind of strength. One that isn't built on the latest software or state-of-the-art equipment, but on depth of history, of alliances, of strategy. Iran doesn't move with quick sparks of technology. It moves with patience, with endurance, with layers of influence stretched far beyond its borders. It has depth not just in land or missiles, but in mindset. Its alliances, especially with proxies across the region, are not loud, they're deeply embedded. Iran understands how to play the long game. It knows how to wait, how to survive pressure, and how to build influence in places that others forget to look. And sometimes that kind of patience, it's more threatening than the most sophisticated weapon. When you compare these two forces, you realize it's not just a matter of numbers or size. It's two very different kinds of preparation. One is fast, smart, and forward-moving. The other is rooted, layered, and enduring. One leans on machines, the other on movements. And yet, both are shaped by the same thing, fear. Fear of being invaded, misunderstood, outmatched, or erased. It's this fear that fuels their development, that keeps them awake at night, pushing them to keep evolving, keep preparing, keep showing the world that they are not to be taken lightly. But here's what we often forget. It doesn't matter how strong your defenses are or how far your missiles can reach. If your people are constantly living in tension, if a child grows up measuring safety by the sound of sirens or the calm between attacks, what kind of strength is that, really? Weapons can protect borders, but only wisdom can protect generations. We often glorify the most advanced tools, the most shocking capabilities. We talk about how quick a missile can hit its target, how stealthy a drone can fly undetected. But there's no technology in the world that can replace the value of peace. No cyber weapon, no nuclear program, no alliance, no dome can give the kind of security that a peaceful heart brings. Because behind all the military showdowns, behind the rivalries and the strategies, there are people. Mothers who just want their children to wake up to silence. Fathers who don't want to send their sons to war. Young people who are tired of growing up in fear, wondering if they'll ever see a future not shaped by conflict. That's the side we rarely see, the side that's not broadcast, the human side. Yes, Israel has the edge in advanced warfare. Their defense is brilliant, their systems impressive, and yes, Iran has depth. A kind of strength that doesn't rely on display, but on determination. But in the end, does it really matter who's more powerful if the cost is a future that never knows peace? Power should be used to protect, not to and strength should be measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you choose to preserve. So maybe it's not about who has the better weapons. Maybe it's about who has the bigger courage to seek a different path. A path where advancement means lifting people, not threatening them. Where strategy isn't just about outmaneuvering, but understanding. Where power isn't just sharp, it's also why. Because in a world obsessed with force, the real revolution is peace. And the bravest nations are the ones that know when not to strike, even when they can. There's a kind of battle that doesn't make the news. It doesn't have tanks or missiles or screaming headlines. It happens quietly, in the heart. In the moment a leader has to choose between pride and peace. In the moment a nation stands at a crossroads and decides not what it can do, but what it should do. Because war will always show you who's louder, who's faster, who can hit harder, but it will never show you who's wiser. We've seen it through generations, countries fighting for control, for land, for revenge, and in the end, what's left? Rubble, graves, a silence that settles over broken buildings and broken hearts. And somewhere in that silence, there's a whisper, a question that no one wants to ask. Was it worth it? Wisdom doesn't come with noise. It comes with restraint. It comes with the ability to see beyond the next strike, the next move, the next victory. It asks what happens after the war ends. What happens when the flags are raised but the people are still mourning? What happens when the battle is won but the soul of a nation is lost? Winning is easy to define on a battlefield. You count how many survived, how much territory was gained, how many enemies were taken down. But real winning, that's harder. That's not about land or numbers. It's about legacy, about what kind of world you leave behind, about whether the children growing up tomorrow will be safer, freer, and more whole than those who came before. There are leaders who rise with fire, with fury, with fists ready to fight. But the ones who truly change the world, they rise with calm, with clarity, with the kind of strength that doesn't need to scream to be heard, the kind of strength that says, I can fight, but I choose not to, because I know where this road leads. Wisdom looks like weakness to some. They mistake peace for surrender, dialogue for delay, understanding for indecision. But it takes far more courage to walk away from a fight than to run straight into one. It takes far more strength to forgive than to retaliate. And it takes far more vision to build a bridge than to drop a bomb. History has seen its share of conquerors. But what the world remembers most, what lives on in books, in hearts, in generations, are the peacemakers, the ones who refuse to let war be the only answer, the ones who knew that every bullet has a price, and that sometimes that price is far too high. Because the truth is no one really wins in war. There are just degrees of loss. Some lose their land, others lose their people, some lose homes, others lose hope, and some, even after claiming victory, lose their humanity along the way. So maybe, just maybe, the question isn't who's winning. Maybe the real question is who's listening, who's slowing down long enough to hear the cries of the innocent, who's brave enough to ask what kind of peace is possible if we just pause, even for a moment, and try. We glorify strength in so many ways. We praise armies, we honor flags, we salute weapons. But what if the greatest strength isn't shown on the battlefield but at a table, where differences are faced with words, not wounds, where understanding replaces assumptions and wisdom leads the way? Because one day the dust will settle, the headlines will change, the soldiers will go home, and all that will be left is the memory, the story we chose to write. Will it be one of destruction or one of dignity? Wisdom is quiet. It doesn't demand attention, but it changes everything. It saves lives, it saves futures, and in the end, it saves us. So, no, war doesn't define winners. Wisdom does. Always has, always will. It's easy to look at powerful nations and admire what they have. The fighter jets, the armored tanks, the sleek missiles lined up in perfect formation. To some, that looks like strength. To others, security. But what most people don't see, what's never captured in press releases or parade grounds, is the cost that never gets written down. The kind of cost that doesn't always come in money, but in meaning, in lives, in hearts that quietly break while the world is too busy measuring firepower. Behind every weapon ever built is a choice, a decision to prioritize destruction, just in case. Countries invest billions in preparing for war, even when no war is happening. And while radar systems are installed, while nuclear heads are developed and drones are trained to kill, somewhere maybe just next door. A child is growing up without a proper school, without food on the table, without safe drinking water. And no one calls that an emergency. There's a silence that follows the sound of an explosion. It's the silence of all the things that could have been built but weren't. The schools that stayed broken, the hospitals that never opened, the dreams that got delayed because leaders were too busy preparing for battles that hadn't even begun. And it's not just about infrastructure. The cost of armament seeps into people, into how they live, into how they sleep at night. There are countries where citizens wake up every day under the weight of knowing that war could begin at any moment, where sirens are more familiar than lullabies, where survival is not just a possibility but a daily calculation. And that kind of life, it changes you. It teaches fear before it teaches hope. Governments will say it's for protection, that it's necessary, and maybe in some ways it is. But who protects the people from the fear that grows in their hearts while the weapons grow in the ground? Who takes care of the wounds that don't bleed but still ache every day? The hidden cost of armament isn't just financial. It's emotional, it's psychological, it's spiritual. Because when a nation pours everything into preparing for war, it begins to forget how to prepare for peace. Dialogue becomes weakness. Compassion becomes risk. And suddenly being cautious is confused with being careless. There's also the cost of division. Weapons create enemies before any shot is fired. When you spend years and years strengthening your arsenal, you begin to see everyone else as a potential threat. Borders become barriers. Conversations become confrontations. Trust gets replaced with suspicion. And slowly, the world becomes colder, more distant, more divided. We forget that behind every border is a family just like ours. People who laugh, cry, love, worry, hope. And when all we do is build weapons, we build walls around our humanity. We stop seeing people, we only see targets. And that is a cost we should never be okay with. Armament also comes at the cost of conscience. Because once you build a weapon, it's always there, waiting, tempting, and all it takes is one wrong move, one bad decision, one moment of anger, and everything can fall apart. That kind of power changes people. It convinces them that might makes right, that dominance is more important than dignity, that the louder you are, the more you matter. But true power, it doesn't need to threaten. It doesn't need to show off. True power lies in the ability to choose peace when war seems easier. In the ability to disarm not just the weapons in your hands, but the anger in your heart. Imagine a world where those same billions were used differently, to heal instead of harm, to build instead of break. Imagine if every drone in the sky carried food instead of bombs. If every satellite used for targeting was repurposed for education, for connectivity, for hope. It's not impossible. It's just uncomfortable. Because peace asks us to look deeper, to stop reacting and start reflecting, to replace fear with faith. Not the blind kind, but the kind that knows people are capable of more than just destruction. That even in a world filled with weapons, peace is still possible, if we're brave enough to choose it. So maybe the question we should be asking isn't how strong is our military. Maybe the better question is, how healthy is our soul? Because in the end, weapons may win wars, but they will never build a life worth living. The real cost of armament is not just in what we spend, but in what we lose. And sometimes, what we lose is far greater than we ever realize, until it's gone. Sometimes, we're so focused on what the world sees that we forget what the heart hears. In a time where every conflict, every crisis, every word is broadcast, recorded, and replayed, the pressure to perform grows stronger. Leaders speak louder. Nations posture taller, the cameras roll, the headlines scream. And in the middle of it all, the world keeps watching. But peace doesn't perform. It doesn't need applause or attention. It doesn't fight for the spotlight. Peace is quieter than that. It listens when no one else does. It leans in when others walk away. And in a world that's always watching, peace becomes the one thing brave enough to hear what most people are too distracted to notice. The world sees missiles. Peace sees mothers. The world sees territory. Peace sees children playing on that soil, dreaming of a tomorrow that isn't interrupted by sirens or fear. The world watches who takes control. Peace listens to who's still hurting, who's still hoping, who's still holding on, even when there's nothing left to hold. That's the thing. Watching is easy. It takes nothing to scroll, to comment, to react. But listening, that takes heart, that takes presence, that takes humility. We live in a time where people are quick to speak and slow to understand, where opinions echo louder than truth, where pride speaks first and wisdom rarely gets a chance to finish its sentence. But peace changes that rhythm. It doesn't speak to be right, it speaks to restore. It doesn't defend to dominate, it opens to understand. And in conflict, that is what's often missing, not weapons, not power, not strategy, but the willingness to stop and truly listen. To listen to the reasons beneath the rage, to listen to the grief that shaped the anger, to listen to the stories that have never been told but live in the eyes of those who've lost too much. The world watches war like it's a game, a scoreboard, who wins, who loses, but no one truly wins when peace loses. So when we read, before we see our people, do we want to see more good than we want to see more bad? It's too hard to pick the winners, but to pick the wins. And in that sense, the world is about truth. The word is deceit. The word is deceit. The word is deception. The word is pushback. The word is deceit. The word is deception. The word is pushback. The word is no one truly celebrates when the prize is. Children growing up too fast, nations growing apart, and humanity forgetting itself. Peace isn't passive. It's powerful. Because to choose peace when war is easier, that takes real courage. It's the kind of courage that doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't strike. It stretches out a hand. It says, I see you, I hear you, and even if I don't agree with you, I will not shut you out. Because listening doesn't mean weakness. It means presence. It means choosing to stay in the room when walking away would be so much simpler. It means caring more about connection than control. And when you truly listen, walls fall, hearts soften, and even the deepest wounds begin to heal. But listening takes time. And we live in a world obsessed with speed. Fast results, fast answers, fast resolutions. But peace doesn't move fast. It walks. It breathes. It asks questions. It takes pauses. And in those pauses, we find something we can't see with our eyes alone. We find meaning. Peace is not blind. It sees clearer than most. It sees the root, not just the reaction. It sees the person, not just the position. And it invites everyone, every side, every story to the table. Yes, the world is watching. It always will be. But maybe that's not the real measure of what matters. Maybe the real question is, are we listening? Are we listening to the voices not captured by microphones, the cries not covered by news networks, the quiet courage of those who choose understanding over outrage? Because peace isn't found in treaties alone. It's found in tone, in timing, in tenderness, in the way we look at one another when we disagree and still say, you matter. There will always be something to watch. But peace reminds us that what we hear in stillness carries more truth than what we see in chaos. It reminds us that while the world watches to judge, peace listens to love. So in a noisy world filled with performances, distractions, and spectacles, let peace be the one that closes its eyes and opens its heart. Because the world may be watching to see who wins, but peace is listening to see who's willing to heal. Because the truth is, history doesn't remember the loudest explosions. It remembers the quiet decisions that saved lives. And in the end, may the strongest weapon of all be wisdom. The wisdom to know that every life lost in war is one too many. The wisdom to lead not by fear, but by faith in a future that can still be saved. Thank you.